During this video about Adobe Experience Design, we are going to create some vector shapes into Adobe XD. So we are going to use all the tools to create vector shapes, and also we are going at the end of the video to create texts. This is because into Adobe Experience Design also the text is a vector tool. So we can see that at the left side of our workspace we have all vector tools. They are all vector tools except for the zoom tool that we have already seen. Of course, we can create a window and it will zoom on the window that we have created. So before we start to create these shapes, I will let you know that to copy and paste, for example, an artboard, you can, of course, click on Ctrl+C and then Ctrl+V on your keyboard, but also you can select the things that you want to select and then click on Alt and it will do a copy even in this way. So now we will create an artboard in which we will create the vector shapes that we want. So, of course, we can create an artboard. Let's move it here, and now let's zoom on it. So, with the double click, we can change the name of the artboard. So we can name it Artboard Shapes, and into the layer panel, of course, we have our artboard. So let's start with the first tool that we also have already seen into other videos. Of course, you can see that when we have only the artboard, we can create a repeat grid. But when we have, for example, a rectangle, we can do this. In fact, now it is activated and we can click on it. But let's now focus on this rectangle. Of course, we can change the width and height of our rectangle from here, and also the X and Y position by moving our rectangle. If we move it from up to down, it will change the Y position in a positive way, and if we do the opposite, it will change in a negative way. Also, if we move our rectangle from left to right, it will change the X position in a positive way and in a negative way if we move it from right to left. This is because X and Y indicates in pixels the distance of our object from the origin of the Cartesian axis. So, of course, we also have the other option. We can rotate our rectangle, and of course, these options are also onto the other vector shapes. So, we can see that we can change the opacity of our rectangle, and also we can use the blend mode, but they are usually used into the images to edit the images. So let's see what option we have in here. Of course, we can change the color of our rectangle, the inner color, and also the color of the border of our rectangle, that now we can see clearly because the border has now the size of 1 pixel. But if we do enlarge it, we can see that we have different colors from here and also from here. And of course, we have all of the code, the hexadecimal code, the red, green, and blue code, and also this code which indicates the hue. So we can change this hue from here, the saturation, of course, the less is the saturation, the less vivid is the color, and also the brightness, hue, saturation, and brightness. So now let's see what else we can do from here. Let's take a color more bright just to see more clearly what we do in here. We can also create a rectangle with a round shape. So we can round the edges of this rectangle. We can do this by clicking onto these handles and drag them, and when we click onto one handle, we change in the same way all of the edges, but we can also change one edge per time by doing this. So by clicking on this option, in here we have the same radius for all corners. As we can see, we can change it also from here or from here by clicking on one handle, but we can also have different radius for each corner, and we can change one corner at a time, so that we can have different shapes. Also, another way to change one corner at a time is to click on Alt and moving one handle. If we move one handle and we don't click on Alt, we will again change them in the same way. But when we click on Alt, we can see that we can change one handle at a time and also control the rounding from here. So we can also, as we saw, change the size of the border, but we can also create a dash. So we can create a dash with some dimensions. We can change the gap between the dashes and also change the dimensions of the dash. And we'll come closer to see this. We can have, like we have right now, an inner stroke, but we can also have an outer stroke. As we can see in here, with an inner stroke, we have the border into our, not anymore rectangle, but into our shape. If we click on outer stroke, we have the dash outside of our shape, and if we click on here, we will have it into the center. So we can also have, like we have right now, a bud cap, but also a round cap and also a projecting cap. There's just a little difference between this and this. In this case, we have the points in here, and in this case, we have them in here, but this is not a major difference. And of course, we can have, like we have right now, a meter join, but also a round join, and a join cut into this way, a bevel join. So we can also create some effects. We can have an inner shadow, an outer shadow, and we can control them from here. We can also have one at a time or two at a time. So we have a lot of tools to change our shapes. So let's create another shape. We can create a line with the option line and with the shortcuts L, and by clicking and dragging we can create a line. And as we can see from here, in this case we do not have options for the fill. We only have the option of the border. Of course, this border means all of our lines. So when we create a line that's larger, it's all filled. But we cannot have with the option line, with the line tool, a border and a fill different from each other. This is the main difference between the line and the other shapes like the rectangle, the polygons, and the ellipses. So, of course, we can still create our dash. We can have these different options on here. And now let's create, for example, a polygon. In fact, when we click onto this triangle icon, we create a polygon. And of course, as you can see, I have created a triangle. The triangle, in fact, is the default polygon, but you can change the sides from here. This is because polygons have to have at least 3 sides, and of course the triangle has 3 sides, so it is the default option. But you can, of course, change the sides and create, for example, an hexagon. In this case, if you have 6 sides for your polygon, of course, you can scale it, you can change the width and height from here, and do all the things that we did before with the rectangle. So, of course, we can change the fill color and the border color, and we can change the size of the border. Of course, we can do all of the things that we did. And for the polygons, we have an handle that's here, and we can pull it to rounding the edges. Of course, we can also control them from here, and we can create a dash and everything that we did before. So now let's create the last predefined shape, and I'm saying predefined because we saw the rectangle, so we create a rectangle. We saw in other videos the ellipse. Of course, if you want to create a perfect circle, you can put the same dimensions for width and height from here. And if you want to maintain the proportions when you scale it, you can click on Shift, or you can click on Shift and Alt to change it from the center. So these shapes that we have created from the rectangle, the ellipse, the polygon, and the line options are all predefined shapes. But when we use the pen tool, we create a shape from zero. So when we click on the pen tool, we can create a shape with edges by clicking, dragging, and then clicking wherever we want the edges of our shape to be, and we can click on Ask to finish our work. But also we can create round edges. So, but to do this, you will have to click and press, and then you will activate these handles by clicking and pressing, and you can create in this way round edges. So you have to click on Ask to finish your work, and if you're asking if you can change these edges from here and change the edges into curves, you can do this. So you can double click onto this shape, and you can double click onto these control points, and if you do this, you will activate the handles. Also, you can do the opposite, so you can double click in here and double click onto this edge, and it will disappear the curve and also the handle. So now we saw what we can do with the handles. Of course, if we click on our shape, we will see all of the options. If we double click, we also will activate the control points. If we double click on the control points, we will activate or deactivate the handles to create curved shapes. And now let's see the main difference, except for what I have already told, that you can create from zero a shape or you can have a predefined shape. The main difference between these shapes and these shapes. In fact, we can call these shapes, so the rectangle, the ellipse, the polygon, and the line, we can call them parametric forms, parametric shapes. And as we can see from the layers, these shapes have at the left side of the name the icon that identifies them. Meanwhile, these shapes are called paths. So this, for example, is called polygon as it is, but this is called path and also this. And as you can see, the icon at the left side of the name, it is a pen. So, of course, you can change the name, but the icon won't change. And so you can distinguish them from here, but also you can see that this shape, for example, this polygon has 6 sides, and whenever I want, I can change the sides of this polygon. Now let's create, for example, 2 triangles so that we can see the difference between these shapes and these parametric shapes in action. So we have this triangle, it has 3 sides, and we can change the sides whenever we want, and we can do all the changes that we can do with a shape. Also, even when we round the edges of our triangle, we can see these options still, and we can see that the icon hasn't changed. But if we do a double click onto our triangle, we can see, first of all, that it is now a path, and also that we cannot have all of the options of the triangle that we have here. And from here, now that we have activated a path, we have these control points and we can create our shapes. And also, if we double click on the edge, we will activate the handle and deactivate it by double clicking again. And so this is the main difference between these parametric shapes and these paths. So now that we saw all of these shapes, all of these tools, we will now see and talk about the text. In fact, as we said, into Adobe Experience Design, the text tool is also a vector tool. So we will create another artboard to create the text, double click on the name, and we will name this artboard text. So we can click on this letter, or also on our keyboard, we can click on the letter T, and we can create a text in 2 main ways. So after we have activated the text tool, we can click and drag with our mouse and create this text box. And in here we can write, for example, text box. Let's go a little closer. Or we can just click onto our artboard or our workspace, and now we have created an insertion. So we can call it insertion. What is the difference between the insertion and the text box? So when we create a text box, so when we click and drag and create a text box, we will create a box in which we can write whatever we want, of course. But when we change the dimensions of the text box from these handles, from these points, we can see that if we go over our text, we will not see what's outside of this text box. And also it will appear this red handle similar to the handle that appears into Adobe InDesign that will let us know that there is text hidden behind the text box. But when we create an insertion, it will create a text box with the dimension of the text that we write, and if we change the dimensions of this text box, it will change the dimension of our text. So, of course, we can double click on the text and change its dimension from here. Of course, we can do this also with the insertion. But the main difference is that when you have a text box, you will have to be careful to not hide the elements, and when we have the insertion, you can change the dimension of the text from here and also from here. So, last but not least, we can click on our text and go to Object, then go to Path, and then click on Convert to Path. Or you can use the shortcut Ctrl+8. And in this case, let's go a little closer. We can click 2 times and we can see that it has created a path. And we can use these control points to create our shapes also from the text. As I said, also the text is a vector tool into Adobe Experience Design. It is similar to what happens into Adobe Illustrator, so you will not have to use Adobe Illustrator to change your text however you want. Of course, if you click 2 times onto these control points, you will create the handle, and if you click 2 times again, you will deactivate the handle, and you can create pretty much whatever shape you want also from the text. So, this is all for this video. Thank you for watching this tutorial about Adobe Experience Design. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. I invite you to see the other videos into this channel, and thank you again. We will see each other in the next video about Adobe Experience Design.